Quarantine, Chapter 8. Go for it.
Okay, Chapter 8. Liz raised herself on her elbows and looked around. She was in a giant room with dark gray walls. There were about 30 cots set up in rows with about 10 feet between cots. Already half of them were filled with patients. Liz saw everything from heart monitors to IV drips to defibrillators. How could so many different illnesses spring up at the same time, she wondered. She took a deep breath and took stock of her own sickness. She was feeling better, she thought. The tiniest sound still seemed really loud, but it was almost as if her ears had adjusted to it, and it now felt normal. More likely, my brain adjusted to it somehow, she thought. The same was true of her heightened vision. The lights no longer seemed too bright. Even her oversensitive skin felt normal now. But still, there was some part of her that knew, that was absolutely positive, that her body couldn't withstand these changes for long. Whatever was going on, she had to find a cure for it, fast. More stretchers were being wheeled by every few minutes. On the latest one, she saw a familiar face. Kyle, she called. He turned toward her and his eyes lit up. Hey, she said to the nurse pushing Kyle's gurney. Can you put my friend next to me, please? The nurse shrugged and steered Kyle over to the empty cot next to Liz. Two other nurses helped lift him from the stretcher onto the bed. After they left, he lay there quietly for a moment recovering. Kyle, can you hear me? Liz called. He recoiled. Yeah, you sound like an air horn. Was I talking that loudly? She wondered. She lowered her voice to a whisper. Can you hear me now? Yeah, that's better, he said. Liz narrowed her eyes at him. His cot was 10 feet away. How could he hear her if she was only whispering? Kyle turned slowly onto his side to face Liz. So what are you in for? I don't know, she replied. I'm still talking in a whisper. I started feeling weird this afternoon. Noises seemed too loud, and lights seemed too bright. Kyle finished for her. He was whispering too. Did your skin feel weird? Tingly? Yes, Liz said excitedly. Exactly. Kyle, do you think everyone in here feels that way? Kyle shrugged. It doesn't look like it, he said. Seems as if most of these people have really serious stuff. Liz thought about it. Your hearing is as sharp as mine now, right? She whispered. It's practically bionic, Kyle replied. So let's just listen for a bit, Liz suggested. Concentrate on hearing what the nurses and doctors are saying. I want to find out what's wrong with all these other people. I want to know if they feel the same way we do. Right, Kyle said, because if they do, I have to assume there's some alien connection. This is too freaky to be an earthly disease. Liz didn't answer. For a while, they both lay quietly. She closed her eyes and concentrated on listening. It was hard to do. Liz felt as if she had to pull strength from the rest of her body in order to focus it all on her heightened hearing. But after a few minutes, she began to pick up conversations from around the room. She couldn't be quite sure where they came from, but that wasn't what mattered. Cancer, one male voice said. Full-blown lymphoma, even though yesterday she had no sign of it. Maybe it just hadn't been noticed yet, another man suggested. That's what I would think, the first voice answered. But she'd had a complete physical a week ago for her life insurance company. It can't begin and spread that quickly. The voices were interrupted by a woman talking more loudly. Mother's brother had diabetes, she was saying, but it's never been in my branch of the family. How can I have it now? We're trying to find out, another woman's voice answered her. Just be patient. She's a doctor, Liz thought. She decided to try something new. She would mentally attach herself to this particular voice. She'd follow the sound of it. Then she'd be able to hear everything the doctor said to her patients or to other doctors. Hey, how are you feeling, Mr. Sharoff? The doctor's voice asked. The sound of it was fainter now, and Liz had to focus all her energy on listening to that one voice, mentally blocking out all the other voices in the room. It was a little like tuning a radio to the right frequency. I feel okay, a man's voice answered, but I just can't seem to walk straight. It's like my left leg doesn't have any muscles in it. And you never noticed this before today? The doctor asked. No, never. Mr. Sharoff, is there any multiple sclerosis in your family? The doctor sounded worried. Liz thought, no. Now the patient sounded worried too. A wave of exhaustion passed over Liz, and she had to stop listening while she rested for a minute or two or so. When she tuned back in, the doctor was talking to a nurse. Woman's symptoms are consistent with Marfan syndrome, but how can that be? She felt fine up until today. It's the same thing all the patients are saying, the nurse replied. I've been with the CDC for 10 years, the doctor said. I've never seen anything like this. It's as if something just activated every illness lying dormant in these people's genes. Kyle, Liz whispered, turning her head to look at him. I'm here, he whispered back. What did you find out? All these people have hereditary diseases, Liz told him, except they're suddenly full-blown cases, and patients who have never even had symptoms before. So they had these diseases in their genes, but they wouldn't necessarily have gotten sick, Kyle asked. Right, Liz replied. It's like something happened that just turned on all these inactive genes. Kyle was silent for a moment. Then what dormant genetic disease do we have? I don't know, Liz admitted. There's something else, Kyle said. Do you know where we are? No, it was too bright while they were moving me. I had to sort of shut down, Liz said. In fact, she could barely remember anything that had happened while they moved her. All she remembered was a barrage of sensations that had made her feel like passing out. One heightened sense at a time she could handle. But sound, light, and movement all together, it had been awful. I couldn't take it either, Kyle said. I sort of cocooned all the way here, but I heard some of the nurses talking about it because they think it's odd. What's odd? The fact that we're at Medichem, Kyle said. Liz felt like she'd been slapped. Medichem, where she'd found the alien cells. Could there possibly be a connection? Liz, didn't you say there was a chemical spill here this morning? Kyle asked. She nodded. Some test tubes got knocked over. Do you think there could be any connection between that and this disease outbreak? I don't know, Liz whispered. But if there is, then this whole thing is my fault. Maria pulled the Jetta into the free driveway and turned it off. She rested her head against the steering wheel for a moment, trying to collect her thoughts. She was worried about her mother, but there didn't seem to be anything she could do about that right now. And in the meantime, she'd left Sadie here with Michael hours ago. She needed to get Amy to the hospital quickly, so she'd been able to ignore the Sadie dilemma for a while. But she had to face it eventually. She had a half-sister and a half-brother, for that matter, and a stepmother, and the worst father in history, she thought bitterly. But the main problem at the moment was Sadie. Her sister was only a kid, and she'd run away from home. Maria had to get her back to Phoenix somehow, and she had to do it quickly. With a sigh, she opened the car door and climbed out. Before she had a chance to close the door behind her, Michael came running from the house. Maria, don't freak out, he said. She looked him up and down. You don't even know what's going on, she said. At the hospital. Hello, Maria. After all these years, Maria couldn't believe that she recognized his voice. But she did, instantly. Her father was standing behind Michael, in the doorway to her house. She shot a furious look at Michael. What is he doing here? She spat. I told you, don't freak out, Michael said lamely. Maria pushed by him and stormed up to the door. Get out of my house, she said. Now. No, her father said. Maria opened her mouth, but no words would come into her brain. She was too filled with fury. This house is part mine, he said conversationally. The down payment was all my money, and every single cent since then has been Mom's money, Maria snapped. The stupid down payment doesn't give you the right to set foot on this property ever again after the way you treated us. Now I said, get out. And I said, no, he replied. Maria, look. Why did you let him in? Maria demanded, turning on Michael. He was here to pick up Sadie, Michael said. She called him right after you left for the hospital. Is your mom okay? I don't know, Maria said, the very thought of Amy bringing a lump to her throat. If her mother knew that this awful man was standing here in her house. Maria, said a small voice. Maria swallowed hard and tried to smile at Sadie, who appeared in the doorway behind their father. Sadie, I'm sorry, she said. I know he's a good father to you, but I can't stand him, so I really need you guys to leave now. That's what I'm trying to tell you, Michael put in. They can't leave. Why not? Because whatever sickness Amy has seems to have spread to the whole city, her father said. There's a quarantine. No kidding, Maria said. I was in the hospital, remember? The entire town is quarantined. Excuse me. Michael said. They have roadblocks set up, and no one can get in, and no one can leave. And that includes Richard. Richard? You're on a first-name basis with my father now? She hissed. Maria, Michael began. We tried to go home, Sadie interrupted. It made us turn around. And it's just as well, Richard said. I wanted to see you, Maria. We have a lot to talk about. Now we'll have the chance. I have nothing to say to you, Maria replied. If you wanted to see me so badly, you could have any time in the past decade. I understand why you're angry with me, but I'd like to tell you my side of the story, Richard said. And since we're stuck here, this seems like a good time to... If you're not stuck, go to a hotel, Maria said. No, he replied. I'm still your father, and I expect you to do me the courtesy of listening to me. Maria turned to her boyfriend. Michael, will you make him leave, please? Michael took both of her hands in his. Baby, I think you should talk to him, he said gently. It might make you feel better. Maria's mouth dropped open in astonishment. Excuse me, she said. A shrill beeping sound split the air. Michael's cell phone. He grabbed it out of his pocket and flipped it open. What? He said into the phone. But Maria already knew who it was. Isabel or Max or maybe Valenti. Someone from their group calling to set up an alien powwow. The quarantine at the hospital had been strange enough. The fact that it was now a citywide quarantine called for some serious investigation by those who happened to have superhuman powers. Fine, Michael barked. He snapped the phone shut and stared pleadingly at Maria. You're going to kill me, she sighed. No, I know you have to go where you're needed. Michael bit his lip. I don't want to leave you in the middle of this, he said, nodding toward her father and Sadie. Then hurry back, Maria told him. The truth was she wanted to hurl herself into his arms and beg him not to leave her alone with her father. She desperately needed moral support from him. But giant otherworldly crisis always took precedence over her life. She mustered up a smile to make Michael feel better. Keep me posted. I'm so sorry, he said. Then he hurried over to his motorcycle, leaped on, and sped away. Maria turned back to her father. This had better be good, she said. Michael screeched to a stop in front of the Valenti house, jumped off his bike, stomped up the walkway. He was seething. What kind of a boyfriend would leave Maria in a situation like that? Her father had abandoned her, and now she was alone with him, without her mom for support, and without her useless boyfriend, he thought angrily. No matter how hard he tried, he never seemed able to be there for Maria when she needed him. He always had to put his alien responsibilities first. He knew he had no choice, but every so often he wished he could be a better boyfriend to Maria. He slammed through the door and stopped in surprise. Isabel, Max, and Valenti all turned their worried eyes to him. They look like crap, he thought. Just how bad was it at the hospital, he said out loud. Because you all look like crap. Isabel rolled her eyes. It's bad, Valenti said. Half the city is sick. Kyle, Maria's mom, and Liz, Max said. What? Michael cried. They're all sick? They're all in quarantine, Isabel told him. The CDC said they were taking all the patients over to Medichem to treat them. Michael was baffled. Medichem? The pharmaceutical company? Yeah, Valenti answered. They say they've got better labs over there and enough space. They don't want to have to shut the hospital down. That's weird, Michael said. Isn't it? I'm thinking the CDC can control access to the patients better if they don't have other people come in and out, Max said. At the hospital, there's a big staff, and there are all the people who are already patients there. Well, they definitely want tight control, Michael agreed. They've shut down the whole town. No one gets in or out. This makes me nervous, Isabel said. It's not an alien hunt. It's a quarantine, Max told her. Still, we've got to put an end to it as soon as possible. We have to break into Medichem tonight. What? Michael said. Why? Because I'm going to heal those people, Max announced.
Quarantine? Chapter 9. Liz, you awake? Kyle whispered. In the bed next to him, Liz stirred. Yeah, she said. I don't really feel like I can sleep anymore. All my senses just keep racing. I know what you mean, he said. I keep hearing things even when I don't want to. That wasn't the worst part, though. The worst part was how much his skin hurt wherever the thin cotton sheet touched him, which was everywhere. But he didn't want to complain. He knew Liz must be bothered by it, too. What do you say we blow this joint? He suggested. How? Liz asked skeptically. Look around, Kyle said. Everyone's asleep, and the doctors all went to some big doctor meeting about 5 minutes ago. I heard them talking. Liz sat up in bed and glanced around. Wow, I'm really out of it, she said. I didn't even notice. How could she not notice, Kyle thought. It's so much quieter in here without all the doctors asking questions. I feel like it's getting more internal, Liz went on. Before, I was feeling things and hearing things that were going on around me. Now I keep hearing stuff inside me. You know, my heartbeat and the sound of my own breathing. Okay, Liz is tripping out, Kyle thought, worried. He needed her to be alert so that they could find an answer to all this. Well, then we need to take a little walk before you slip into a coma or something. Where? Liz asked. You want us to try to sneak outside? No, I was thinking we visit that lab again, the one you work in. I'm more interested in what's behind those locked doors than I used to be. You might be right, Liz said. If I see what materials Dr. Sosa was working with, maybe I can figure out what it was that I spilled, and then we'll be able to tell if it could be causing all these diseases to spring up. Suddenly, Liz sank back on her pillow as if all her energy had been drained just by sitting up for half a minute. She lay there exhausted, just staring up at the ceiling. Liz, you okay? Kyle asked. I don't get it, Liz murmured, as if she was talking to herself. How could one tiny spill do all this? I mean, I cleaned it up right away. It was like spilling a cup of coffee or something. There was hardly anything in those test tubes. That can't be what's causing this, can't be. He was really getting worried about her. They might show the same symptoms, but the sickness was obviously hitting Liz a lot harder than it was hitting him. She sounded practically delirious, and he couldn't tell whether she even remembered he was there. Think about it, he told her. This guy has been doing research on alien cells. You saw them yourself. He's not to be trusted. How do you know he wasn't developing some kind of alien repellent or something? Kyle knew he sounded like an idiot, but he wanted to keep Liz focused on the problem at hand. And as far as he was concerned, there was something fishy about a scientist who was me and Liz Parker, had alien cells on a slide, and kept his supply closet locked. Liz was giggling now. If that was an alien repellent, it sure didn't work, she said loudly. You and I are the closest things to aliens in here, and we're not nearly as sick as everyone else. Shh, Kyle said. He didn't want to be talking about aliens in anything other than a whisper. And besides, he heard footsteps approaching their beds. He and Liz both lay silently, pretending to sleep, while a nurse came and checked on them. Only when the footsteps had died away did Kyle stir. He slowly swung his legs over the side of the cot and raised himself to his feet. He could actually feel the air rush over his skin as he moved. It didn't hurt exactly, but it took some getting used to. You ready, Liz? She had struggled up to a sitting position. She glanced at him and nodded. Let's go. You can all stop the covert planning, Valenti said, coming back into the living room from wherever he'd been. Max couldn't keep track of everyone. All his thoughts were focused on Liz. Where was she? Was she feeling any better? Were they doing tests on her? Was she afraid? Why? He asked Valenti, trying to keep his mind on the project at hand, figuring out how to break into Medichem. Valenti held up a credit card, because Kyle left this in his room. You want to bribe them with Kyle's good credit? Mike laughed in a deadpan voice. No, you dope, it's a key, Isabel said. Kyle works at Medichem, remember? He is a pass key. Max snatched it out of Valenti's hand. Excellent, he said. Let's go. He started for the door. Whoa there, Maxwell, Michael cried. We still need a plan. Why? Max snapped. The plan is I go there, I open the door, and I start healing. Isabel put her hand on his arm. I know you're worried about Liz, she said, but you can't heal everyone in that place. Even if you didn't get caught, you wouldn't survive it. She's right, Max, Michael said. Remember how wiped you were after you healed those kids on the cancer ward? And there were a lot more people in Medichem. Well, what's your plan then? Max exploded. He knew he was being unreasonable, but he couldn't help himself. Why did Liz have to be among the sick people? I think it has to be an information gathering mission, Valenti said. You go in, you see if those CDC docs have come up with any ideas on what's causing all this. Then we decide how to fix it. I go in, I heal Liz and Kyle and Maria's mom, Max said. With her mom better, Maria will be able to help us without freaking out. I don't know about that, Michael put in. Maria's dealing with some heavy stuff right now. Huh? Max shot a surprised look at Michael. He'd assumed that Maria wasn't here because she was so upset about her mother. Had he been so wrapped up in his own fears for Liz, he'd missed some big thing happening to Maria? Is she okay? He asked. Yeah, but count her out on this one, Michael said, gruffly. Max saw the concern in Michael's eyes. I'm not the only one worried about the woman I love, he thought. He clapped Michael on the shoulder. We'll get through this faster if I can heal Liz and Kyle. Then they can help us from the inside, and Maria's mom, just for good measure. Fine. Michael will have to run cover for you, Isabel said. So I'll do some snooping and see if I can figure out what the doctors have discovered. What about me? Valenti asked. You stay here, Max said quickly. He held up a hand to stop Valenti's protest. I know Kyle's in there, but we'll take care of him. You've already gotten in enough trouble trying to help us. Valenti's expression was worried, but he backed down. Max was relieved. He felt guilty that Valenti had sacrificed his job and his good reputation for them. He didn't want to put him in any more danger. Michael and Isabel headed out the door, and Max followed. If we're not back by tomorrow morning, get Maria and come up with plan B, he told Valenti. I won't have to, Valenti said. Max nodded and stepped out into the night, hoping Valenti was right. Maris flung open the door to Alan Sosa's lab. As she expected, he was still there, working away. He might not approve of her methods, but he was fascinated by the healer. Any scientist would be. We have to move the evidence, she announced. Alan whirled around to face her. What do you mean? The CDC has started narrowing the path of the disease. They're getting close to Liz Parker. Already? He cried. Maris shrugged. They're more effective than I expected, but I found out something very useful from one of their researchers. She took a few steps closer to Alan just because she knew it would freak him out. He didn't like people invading his personal space. Apparently, someone overheard Liz Parker talking about a chemical spill in your lab. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? Alan took a step back. It was nothing. An inert material, completely harmless. Why did it spill? Maris advanced on him again. Alan looked frightened. I was upset. I didn't want to test the serum on her. Liz took a sip of it, and I had a panic attack. And I started coughing to cover it. I didn't want her to notice that I was upset. Maris put her hand on his arm. Go on. Alan stared down at her hand, his arm twitching with the need to jerk away from her. Liz was worried about the coughing, he said in a rush. She hit me on the back, and I jumped and knocked over some test tubes. He yanked his arm away from Maris and walked quickly to the other side of the lab table. It was harmless, he repeated. No, it wasn't, Maris told him. His mouth dropped open in surprise. Sure it was. That's not what we're going to tell the CDC, Maris said. We're going to say the spill caused a mutation in Liz when she cleaned it up. We're going to let them believe that's what started this whole epidemic. Alan was hyperventilating. But then they'll think it was my fault. I'll be discredited. I'll be completely ruined. You'll be rich, Maris countered. You helped me hide all the evidence of a healer from the CDC, and I'll give you enough money to buy your own island. You'll never need to work again. It's unethical, he whispered. I can't lie to the CDC. Oh, Alan, Maris said in a baby talk voice. Of course you can. After all, you certainly can't tell them the truth. That would ruin you even more. He stared at her, wild-eyed. She was right, and he knew it. They're coming in a few minutes to empty out your lab, she told him. They want to figure out exactly what spilled, so you need to make sure they don't find out it was a harmless substance. And you need to make sure they don't find the serum, the cells you took from Liz Parker, or the cells we have from the healer. Understood? Dr. Sosa sat down heavily on a lab stool. He looked devastated. Good, Maris said with a smile. Maria flipped over to her stomach and pretended to keep reading her book. Who am I kidding? She wondered. No one else was even watching her. She closed the book and put her head down on the bed. Voices floated in from the kitchen where her father was cooking dinner for Sadie. Part of Maria hated the idea of him in there, puttering around, using her mom's pots and pans, and part of her wanted to run out of the kitchen and throw her arms around her. Run out to the kitchen and throw her arms around him. A tear ran down Maria's cheek. It had been hard even getting over the fact that he left her. All her life she felt like a failure, like she must have done something so horrible that even her own father didn't love her. For years she blamed herself for him leaving, even though Amy had always told her it wasn't her fault. She'd never gotten over it, really, but she'd sort of gotten used to it. And now here he was again. Maria used to fantasize about reuniting with her father. In her daydreams, of course, he always came back with a good excuse, like he'd been deep sea diving, and he hit his head and had amnesia all these years. In none of her daydreams did he show up and announce that he'd been happily living one state over with his wife and his two real kids. Anger surged up inside her. How dare he come back to her house and refuse to leave? I should call the cops and make them kick him out, she thought. But of course she couldn't do that. For one thing, the cops were busy trying to quarantine a bizarre disease. For another, the cops wouldn't have to kick Sadie out too. And Maria didn't want Sadie to get hurt. It was bad enough that the kid had a liar for a father. Your mother said to tell you that you're grounded for a month. Richard's voice caught Maria's attention. Sadie groaned expressively, and Maria smiled. None of that, Richard said. You ran away to another state, young lady. You deserve to be grounded. You didn't tell me I had a sister, Sadie retorted. You deserve to be grounded, too. You tell him, pipsqueak, Maria thought. I agree, Richard said. I'll be grounded for as long as you are. I definitely should have told you about Maria, and I'm sorry I didn't, but I wasn't in touch with her myself, and I didn't know how to explain that to you. So explain it now, Sadie said. Maria bolted upright. She wanted to hear this, too, but her father just sighed. I don't think you'll understand it, Sweet Pea, he said. Maybe when you're older. Maria felt as if he'd stabbed her. Sweet Pea had been his pet name for her. It was one of the only things she remembered about him. He just replaced me with another Sweet Pea, she thought. Are you going to leave me and Junior and Mom the way you left Maria and her mother? Sadie asked. No, Richard said firmly. No, I am not. I would never leave you. That's because he loves you, Sadie, Maria thought, as tears spilled down her face. He just didn't love me that much. You still feel spacey? Kyle asked. Liz shook her head. She didn't trust herself to talk because what she actually felt was nauseated. This was the first time she'd tried to walk since she'd gotten sick of the bowling alley. She kept getting so distracted by the feeling of her muscles working, pulling against one another to propel her forward, that she forgot to actually put one foot in front of the other. And the ground looked really far away. It was hard to balance. I wonder if this is how I felt when I first started learning to walk, she thought. Kyle slipped his arm around her waist. Just hang on to me. I'll get us there. Aren't you sick too? She whispered. Not like you, he replied. I still have the thing where noises are loud and lights hurt my eyes, but I'm not hearing my heartbeat or anything like you are. I feel my muscles working, she whispered. I feel the oxygen being pumped into my blood. Even in her hypersensitive state, Liz recognized the fear in Kyle's eyes. Don't worry about me. I can still think clearly. I just have to concentrate. Okay, but I'm getting scared, he said. I don't know if I want such an intimate knowledge of my body's workings. Liz smiled and focused on walking. They were almost to Dr. Sosa's lab. Getting out of the quarantine room had been easy. There weren't even guards at the doors. Clearly, they weren't expecting anyone to get up and leave. Most of the other people were way too sick, and with the acute hearing she and Kyle now had, they were able to avoid being found. They heard people coming a good minute before they saw them. In fact, Liz heard something now, the sound of metal scraping against the floor. She glanced at Kyle. He heard it too. There's a janitor's closet across from Dr. Sosa's lab. He whispered. Liz nodded. The door to the lab was about 10 feet away on the left, and the janitor's closet was maybe 6 feet away on the right. Let's go fast, she whispered back. Kyle pulled her forward, and soon they were safely hidden in the closet. Kyle kept the door open a tiny bit, and through this sliver of space, they had a good view of the door to the lab. It was opening. Looks like we got here just in time, Kyle whispered. Liz nodded silently. She had no idea what would happen if they were found wandering around Medichem, and she didn't particularly want to find out. Two big guys were dragging a large metal drum out into the hallway from the lab. Wait, one more thing. To Liz's surprise, Dr. Sosa walked out of the lab. He was carrying a small plastic box. One of the guys opened the top of the metal drum, and Dr. Sosa placed the box inside. That's everything. The guys loaded the metal drum onto a hand truck that stood in the hallway, and as they pushed it away down the hall, Liz noticed that they wore jackets with CDC printed on the back. Dr. Sosa watched them go. Liz could hear his heavy breathing from here. Maris Wheeler appeared in the doorway behind him. I trust the CDC will find exactly what they should find, Alan. Dr. Sosa didn't answer. He turned and stormed down the hall in the other direction. Maris Wheeler shook her head. Then she followed the CDC guys, leaving the lab door wide open. These people are weird, Kyle whispered after all the footsteps had died away. He pushed open the closet door and helped Liz across the hall and into Dr. Sosa's lab. Liz glanced around. The lab was empty. Everything is gone, she told Kyle. That's for sure. He pointed to the back of the room. The door to Dr. Sosa's locked closet hung open, and the shelves inside were bare. It's all in that metal drum they took away, Liz said. Dr. Sosa had to turn over the whole lab to the CDC. Why? Kyle asked. I think he's been doing something wrong, Liz guessed. Some kind of rogue research, maybe with those alien cells I saw. That would explain why he didn't want me in his lab. And then Mrs. Wheeler found out about it, and she made him give everything to the CDC. Because she thinks he started the epidemic with his chemical spill? Kyle asked. Liz nodded. Kyle thought about it for a minute. Well, that's good work, Nancy Drew, he said. But what was the chemical spill that... But what was the chemical that spilled? And why is it making everyone sick? I don't know, Liz admitted. They stood silently for a moment. This trip through Medichem hadn't really provided any new leads, but it had taken a lot out of them. I think my symptoms are starting to change too, Kyle said finally. I'm starting to feel... Never mind. What? Liz asked. Well, strong, like I have superpowers or something. Super hearing, sharp vision. I can feel all my muscles working, but my body can't handle it. I know what you mean, Liz said. I think our bodies are burning through a lot of energy. Our metabolism is speeding up. There's only so long we'll be able to take it. Let's get back to bed while we still can, Kyle said. Maria? Sadie peeked her head around the bedroom door. I'm going to bed. Maria jumped. She hadn't heard Sadie coming. She hastily shut the diary she'd been writing in underneath her pillow. Okay. Is it all right if I sleep in your mom's bed? Sadie asked. Dad's going to sleep on the couch. Just the mention of her mother got Maria hyperventilated again. She hadn't heard from Michael, and so she didn't know what the pod squad was up to. And she hadn't been able to get anyone at the hospital to tell her what was going on with the quarantine patients. Every hour that passed made her more frantic about her mom. You know what? She said, why don't you sleep in my bed? I kind of want to stay in my mom's room tonight. Really? Sadie cried happily. I could stay in your room? Cool. Maria laughed. Let me get my things. She snatched a nightshirt from her top drawer. Then she pulled her diary out from under the pillow and stuffed it into the shirt. Okay, it's all yours. Sadie launched herself in the bed like an eager puppy. Your room is so pretty, she said, bouncing up and down. Good night, Maria told her, pulling the door closed behind her. Good night, Maria, Sadie sang after her. Still smiling, Maria padded down the hallway towards her mother's room. Change of plans? Richard asked from the kitchen. Maria froze. She didn't want to talk to him. She hadn't even acknowledged his presence since Michael left, but she couldn't really avoid him now. She went into the kitchen. I want to sleep in my mother's room because I miss her and I'm worried about her, she said. Her dad nodded. That makes sense. This quarantine is very stressful. Well, it would be less stressful if you would leave. Maria said. I don't want you here, and I think you should respect my wishes. I wouldn't feel comfortable leaving you here alone, he replied, with your mother not home, I mean. You left me alone for years, Maria snapped, and I'm almost 18, though you probably didn't know that. I can handle being alone in the house. I know exactly how old you are, Maria, he said. Oh, that's right, she answered. You had a whole life on me, that's what Sadie said. So let's see, you know what I look like in sucky school pictures, and you know what I get, and you know that I get A's in art and C's in math. So I guess you think you know me really well, huh? Maria, is that your version of being an involved father? Maria interrupted, sending a private investigator to follow me around. I want to know why you had someone spying on me. Her father blew out of breath. Because I wanted to know how you were, he said. The more established modes of finding that out are to call and ask or to set up visitation weekends, Maria said sarcastically. I know, but I couldn't face you. Richard's eyes were wet. I will not feel sorry for him, Maria thought. I don't care if he sobs like a baby. I felt so guilty, he went on, for what I did to you. Your mother and I, we were terrible together, but I always loved you. I handled it badly. I abandoned you, sweet pea, and I couldn't stand the guilt. Don't call me that, Maria said coldly. I'm trying to do it right this time, her dad said. With Sadie and Junior, I try to be a good father to them because I was such a bad father to you. I'm not saying that it makes up for the way I treated you, but I am a good father now. You're right. That doesn't make up for it, Maria said. I spent my entire life feeling worthless and unlovable because of you. It's nice that you're good to Sadie, but it doesn't help me. Richard bowed his head. Okay, he said, I had to try, but if you want, I'll take Sadie to a hotel in the morning, and we'll stay there until the quarantine is lifted. Yes, that's what I want, Maria said. She turned and went to her mother's room and closed the door. And then the tears came. Chapter 10. Valenti said he thinks it's private security, Michael said quietly. He was crouched in the well-manicured bushes that surrounded the Medicam property. Isabel and Max knelt next to him. About 20 feet away stood a parked van with a couple of guys in uniform sitting in front. There were similar vans dotted around the parking lot. They're not paying close attention, Michael said. If we distract them, we should be able to run right by. Okay, Max said. We'll aim for that door. He pointed it out. Be ready to unlock it quickly. Michael nodded. They could all use their powers to undo locks, but for some reason, Michael could do it faster than the others. Exploding light bulbs, though, was Isabel's specialty. Would you like to do the honors? He asked. She narrowed her eyes at the street lamp closest to the parked van. It was a big lamp meant to illuminate all the parking spaces for 40 feet around it. Isabel raised her hand and the lamp exploded in a spectacular display of light. The uniformed guys whistled and yelled, paying more attention to the burned-out light than to the three teens racing through the darkness just behind the van. Michael reached the door first, and he could feel the heat in his hand, even as he reached for the handle. He was never sure quite how he opened locks. He simply knew that he visualized the lock opening, and that's what it did. He yanked open the door. Max and Isabel ran through, and he followed them inside. The whole thing took less than 10 seconds. They stood together in the darkness of an empty Medicam hallway, breathing hard. Here's where we split up, Michael said. Maxwell, you and I will head for the quarantine room. You look for CDC headquarters. Isabel nodded. Good luck, she said, and disappeared into the darkness. So where's the quarantine room? Michael asked. Max shrugged. It's got to be big. They have a lot of people there. I'm thinking they must have a warehouse or something, Michael said. I guess we just start looking indoors until we find it. It's going to be a long night, Max said. Isabel snuck through the dark hallways at Medicam. The place was virtually abandoned. Every so often, a security guard would cross the hall in front of her, but she always managed to avoid them. I wonder where Jessie is, she thought. She knew it was important for one of them to find out what the CDC was up to, but secretly she wanted to find the quarantine room herself and make sure Jessie was okay. The way he had looked when they wheeled him into the emergency room, so pale, so afraid, it broke Isabel's heart. I offered them my facilities. A woman's voice broke into Isabel's thoughts. They're going to have to play by my rules. Isabel flattened herself against the wall and waited as the woman approached the crossing in front of her. I want full information sharing, and that's that, the woman was saying as she came into view. She was small and blonde, wearing an expensive outfit. Isabel recognized her from articles she'd read in the paper. Maris Wheeler, the head of Medicam. She was with a pasty-faced guy in the lab coat. Maris had stopped in the middle of the area where the two hallways crossed. Isabel held her breath, wishing she could disappear into the hall behind her. If Maris decided to turn down this hall, Isabel would be found for sure. I'll tell them you said no running tests unless you share the results, the lab coat guy said. He started to turn away. No, wait, Maris ordered him. I'll go tell them myself. She turned and clacked down the hall on her high heels. Isabel let out the brush she'd been holding. What a stroke of luck. It sounded as if Maris was going to talk to the CDC people who were set up at Medicam, and that was exactly where Isabel wanted to be. Keeping as quiet as possible, Isabel began to follow them. Before long, they reached an office complex where the lights were bright and people were bustling around. It seemed strange to see such a busy area within this giant, silent building. Isabel checked her watch. It was nearly 2 in the morning, but the CDC people were clearly going to work around the clock until they figured out what was going on in Roswell. Good, she thought. The sooner they find the cause of all this, the sooner they can help Jesse. She pictured her brother in the quarantine room. She'd wanted to ask him to heal Jesse while he was there, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. She'd made a promise to herself never to let Jesse find out the truth about her alien life. And besides, they were broken up. The image of his stricken face came back into her mind. He'd had a heart attack, and that was serious. If he didn't make it through this, I'll never forgive myself. Isabel couldn't walk down the well-lit hall and put her ear up to the door. She glanced up at the ceiling. It was made of the typical thin fiberglass tiles. They wouldn't hold much weight. Still, she saw no other option. She'd have to chance it. There was a lab coat in the hallway where she stood. She climbed up on it, pushed one of the ceiling tiles inside, and pulled herself up into the crawl space above. Immediately, she lay flat on her stomach. If she distributed her weight as evenly as possible, she'd be less likely to break through the fragile tiles. Staying on her stomach, she crawled slowly along until she heard voices. Believe we found the trail of the infection, the man was saying, but we're no closer to knowing its pathology. Frankly, many of my colleagues find it highly unlikely that a sudden outbreak of different diseases is related to a single infection. Well, you seem to believe it, Dr. Farrell, Maris Wheeler replied. Otherwise, you wouldn't have come to Roswell so quickly. Isabel thought that Maris sounded kind of annoyed that they'd come to Roswell at all. With all due respect, Miss Wheeler, Dr. Farrell said, I'm well aware that Medicam is doing DNA research. Once you start messing with things at that level, anything is possible. I'm well aware that Medicam is doing DNA research. Once you start messing with things at that level, anything is possible. The one thing these patients have in common is that all are suffering from hereditary disorders. Whatever bombs were hidden in their DNA, they've all exploded at once. And it's entirely possible that your research could cause such a thing to happen, accidentally, of course. Of course, Maris said coldly. Tell me, doctor, just how could researching DNA lead to an outcome such as this? Dr. Farrell coughed and sputtered a bit. Isabel couldn't keep smiling. This guy was acting as if he knew what was going on, but he really had no idea. Maris had seen right through him. Well, we need to search for the material from Dr. Sosa's lab before we understand the situation entirely, he finally managed to say. Fine, Maris replied. But since I've been cooperative enough to turn over our research to you, not to mention foot the bill for all these 6 people to stay here, the least you can do is share your findings with me. I want copies of any tests you run on those people. Understood? That's highly irregular, Dr. Farrell replied, but I suppose I can make an exception. Isabel sighed and rested her cheek on the ceiling tile beneath her. These people had no idea what was causing the outbreak. It was going to be a long night. Max lay on his stomach underneath the cot of a sick teenager. Michael lay next to him. Now what? Michael whispered. Max knew Michael was impatient, but he couldn't be more anxious than Max himself. It had taken almost an hour to find the room where the quarantine people were being kept, and ever since they'd been hiding, moving slowly from one bed to the next. There weren't many lights on since most of the patients were asleep, but there were enough nurses and doctors to notice 2 guys walking around in the middle of the room. At this rate, they were lucky if they found Liz and Kyle by morning. Michael nudged him. We're near the nurse's station, he whispered. Max peered out from under the bed. Michael was right. The makeshift nurse's station was only about 5 feet away. Even better, there was a fresh pile of linens, clean scrubs, clean sheets, stacked on the edge of a desk, right next to a desk lamp with a tall, thin arm. Can you knock over that lamp? Max asked. I can try. Michael squirmed around until he could aim his hand toward the desk. With a quick glance around to make sure no one was coming, Michael flung a burst of power across the room. The lamp toppled forward as if blown by a strong wind, knocking the pile of linens to the floor. Max shot his hand out and pulled as many scrubs as he could underneath the bed. Then they quickly crawled a few beds away to make sure no one would find them if they came to check on the fallen lamp. In seconds, he and Michael were dressed in scrubs. I'll go first, Michael said. I'll find Liz and I'll stop at her bed. Then you follow me. We'll look more casual if we're not walking around together. Okay. Max watched Michael crawl out under the cot and begin walking slowly up and down the rows of patients. Finally, Michael stopped at the foot of one specific bed. He picked up the chart attached to the bed and began flipping through it. Max shimmied out from under the cot and casually walked out to where Michael stood. In the bed lay Liz, her eyes shut, her body perfectly still. Kyle, Michael whispered, nodding to the next cot over. Max looked. Kyle's eyes were open, but otherwise he lay still as Liz. Michael made his way over to Kyle's bed. How are you guys? He asked in a low voice. Kyle recoiled from him. Quiet, he whispered. I can't stand loud noises. Michael shot Max a confused look, but Max understood. The same thing Liz has, he whispered. Oversensitivity to noise and light, and touch, and smell, and taste, Kyle whispered. But Liz is worse than me. She's gotten really sensitive to feelings inside her body. She says that our metabolism is speeding up and that our bodies can't withstand it. Well, that's why I'm here, Max said. He sat down on Liz's bed, being careful not to jostle her too much. He knew every single movement could be painful to her. It's going to heal Liz, then you, then Maria's mom, Michael told Kyle. Then you and Liz can help us figure out what's going on. We did some snooping earlier, Kyle said. They emptied out that lab where Liz worked. She thinks that Dr. Sosa guy was doing some rogue research. She found alien cells in the lab a few days ago. What? Max cried. Why didn't she tell me? I didn't want to make a big thing out of it until I knew what was going on, Liz whispered. Max looked down at her. Her brown eyes were open now, making her pale skin look even whiter. I didn't think Dr. Sosa knew the cells were alien, she went on. He thought they were cancer cells that mutated into something else. You think he's caused this epidemic somehow? Max asked. I don't know. I can't understand it, Liz murmured. Max, I feel awful. His heart swelled with worry and love for her. Never mind, he whispered. We'll figure it out once you're better. He placed his hand gently against her cheek and concentrated on healing her. Power built within him, heating up his hand against Liz's skin. He pictured her healing, becoming whole, but something was wrong. Usually when he healed, he got flashes of the person he was healing, pieces of their thoughts, their memories, that sort of thing. And with Liz, he got flashes practically every time he touched her. But now there was nothing, just emptiness. Liz moaned. Max concentrated harder, trying to get into Liz's body, trying to heal her from within. She drew her breath in sharply as if something had hurt her. Her muscles began to twitch, almost as if she was having a seizure. Max, stop, Kyle cried. You're making it worse. Max pulled his hand away from Liz. He stared down at her. Her mouth was drawn as if in pain, and her eyes were brimming with tears. It's too much, she whispered. Whatever you were doing, it put more stress on my system. Her voice faded, and her eyes fluttered closed. Liz? Max whispered urgently. Liz! He felt her wrist and was astonished at how fast her pulse was. Just leave her alone, Kyle said. Let her calm down. She goes into a cocoon state where she shuts out all the outside stimuli. We both have to do that every so often. Max couldn't believe that Kyle was telling him this stuff about Liz. Why did Kyle know so much? Max was a healer. He should be able to figure out what was wrong with Liz just by touching her. He felt strangely jealous of Kyle. We can't stay here for long, Michael whispered. Try to heal Kyle. Blood drained from Kyle's face. I don't know about that, he said. I don't want you to make me worse, too. No, Liz whispered frantically. Don't touch him. Her eyes were still closed. Max couldn't tell if she was conscious or if she was just talking in a dream. Why can't I touch him? Max asked her. It's like me. We're the same, Liz whispered. Aliens. Her voice trailed off. Max shot Michael a questioning look. Michael shrugged. Maybe you can't heal this, he said. How can that be? Max asked. She's just sick. They're all sick. And that's what I do. I heal sick people. I don't think we can risk you making anyone else worse, Kyle said. Max was speechless. It seemed as if his healing power had reversed itself somehow. He looked at his hands. Would they really make people sicker? We should go find Isabel. If the CDC has figured out what's causing it, maybe that will help you figure out how to heal it. Michael suggested. Slowly, Max nodded. It seemed like their only option. Crashdown Cafe, Dr. Farrell's voice said. Isabel jerked her head up. She'd almost fallen asleep, stretched out on the ceiling tiles. She had no idea how long she'd been up there, listening to the droning voice of the CDC lab technicians. They were compiling data, trying to find something, anything, that would help them figure out how so many different diseases could crop up at the same time. But what was that about the crashdown? Isabel thought. Did I dream that? You better call Maris Wheeler in here, Dr. Farrell said. Isabel waited, holding her breath, until she heard the clicking of Maris's heels on the floor. Have you found anything useful, Doctor? Maris's cold voice asked. We believe we've isolated the identity of patient 0, Dr. Farrell said. Really? Maris actually sounded interested now. So it is a contagion after all. We're not sure how it works once it infects people, Dr. Farrell said. But yes, it's clearly been spread in a very clean line. A line that starts here in Medicare, by the way. Isabel could hear Maris's little gasp. Surely you're not suggesting that Medichem released some sort of virus, Maris cried. I don't know what to think yet, Dr. Farrell said, but we figured out that this bug is carried in water. It seems to have started with a small group of people who ate at a specific restaurant, the Crashdown Cafe. Our researchers turned up an anomaly in the soup there. Whoever ate the soup became infected, and they in turn infected others by sneezing near them, coughing. Basically anything that would pass the bug along in a liquid form. Great, Michael's cooking strikes again, Isabel thought. I don't know what that has to do with Medichem, Maris said. One of your employees is the daughter of the owner of this restaurant, Dr. Farrell said. She was overheard talking about a chemical spill here in Alexos's lab, and she herself is ill. Based on all of this, we're considering her patient 0. Liz, thought Isabel. Liz Parker, Maris Wheeler said. Yes, Dr. Farrell answered. We'll begin extensive tests on her right away.
Okay, chapter 11. Okay, Liz was crying. She'd been crying ever since Max left. Kyle wished he could comfort her, but his own body was starting to exhibit the symptoms Liz had told him about earlier. Every breath he took, every tiny move he made seemed to reverberate through his whole body. It's like feeling my body work on a cellular level, he thought. Alien, Liz whispered. It was alien, and so am I, so healing doesn't work. She gave a small sob. Kyle didn't know what she was talking about. She seemed delirious. Normally, he would have shushed her when she said the A word, but if anybody heard her now, they would assume it was some fevered dream she was having. Kyle, Liz whispered, you're like me, and we're aliens. Kyle glanced around. Most people were still sleeping, and the nurses were all down at the nurses' station. With a huge effort, he slid off the side of his cot and onto the floor. Then he crawled across to Liz's bed and leaned against it. He was exhausted from that small amount of exertion. Aliens, Liz whispered again. No, Liz, we're not aliens, he said, trying to keep his tone light. Our friends, maybe. Us, no. We are. Suddenly, she sounded so lucid, Kyle turned his eyes up to her face. She was looking back at him intently. We are, you and me, we're different. He changed us. We have alien DNA. That's why we have the same symptoms and why they're different from everyone else's. Kyle's heart gave a sickening bounce. We're aliens because Max healed us, he repeated. When he heals, it changes the person. It changes their DNA, Liz whispered. We have alien DNA mixed with our own, not like them, not like the real aliens, but we have a little. This thing, the virus or whatever, it's affecting our alien DNA. It activated our alien genes, just like it activated Miss DeLuca's gene for asthma, Kyle said. Yes, Liz whispered. It went to our alien genes because it's alien too. What? Kyle could tell Liz thought this was important, but he didn't really understand everything she was saying. In the lab, when I cleaned up the chemical spill, Liz said, whatever that chemical was must have changed me. Wait, are you saying this virus is alien? Kyle asked. I think so. And it's my fault. She started to cry again. I did it. Kyle didn't know what to think. For a second there, Liz had sounded like her old science nerd self. Now she was delirious again. You didn't do anything, he said. Like the spill. I cleaned it up and it got on me somehow. It made my alien DNA alien DNA mutate into this virus. Then I gave it to you. I gave it to everyone, and they'll never find a cure for it because they don't know it's alien. At that moment, a door at the far end of the room swung open. 4 doctors with a gurney rushed in. They checked with the nurses' station, and then all 4 turned and looked right at Liz. Uh-oh, Kyle said. What? A bunch of doctors are coming toward you with a stretcher, Kyle told her. They know it's my fault, she whispered. They have to study me to try to solve the problem. What? Kyle cried. No, they'll find the alien DNA. They won't know what it is, Liz said. They'll just think it's a mutation. The doctors had reached Liz's bed. One of them took Kyle by the arm. He gasped in pain. Her hand felt like a vise. You need to be back in bed, she said, helping him to his cot. The others were lifting Liz onto the gurney. Kyle could see her wincing as they jostled her sensitive body. Where are you taking her? He asked. We need to run some tests on Miss Parker to figure out what's wrong with her, the doctor told him, sitting him down on his cot. Kyle, you have to tell Max, Liz whispered. He's the only one who can figure out how to help these other people. Tell him what I told you. They were pushing Liz away as she said this, and Kyle knew none of the doctors standing right next to her could even hear what she said, but he could, with his alien-enhanced hearing. Liz, hang in there, he whispered back. They then pushed the gurney through the doors and out of the quarantine room. Liz was gone. Isabel was the last to get back to Valenti's house. Michael and Max had been there only about 5 minutes when she showed up, looking worried. Michael felt his shoulders slump. He'd been hoping Isabel had some good news, since he and Max certainly didn't. What did you find out? Max asked. Hello to you too, Isabel retorted. Where's Valenti? On the phone, Michael told her. Did you find the CDC headquarters? Yeah, and they were talking about Liz. What? Max cried. What did they say? Isabel dropped onto Valenti's couch. She's patient 0, and the virus started spreading from the crash down. Apparently they found something funky in your soup, she said to Michael. That's crazy, Max said. How could Liz possibly be the cause of all this? But Michael already knew the answer. The water, he said. Liz had just come from Medichem. She said the soup was too thick, so I took her water bottle and poured the water into it. Then I served it to Kyle and Maria's mom and half the other people at the crash down. I served it all day. He sank down next to Isabel. This whole thing is my fault. But why would Liz's water be infected? Max asked. The CDC doctor said something about a chemical spill. Isabel put in. Yeah, that's why she got sent home early, Michael replied. She said her boss knocked over some gunk, but that it was no big deal. Did you heal Liz? Isabel asked. Maybe she can figure out what happened. Max slammed his fist down on the coffee table. No, he growled. I couldn't heal her. Isabel blinked in surprise. Why not? I don't know. It didn't work, Max said. I made her worse. Michael watched as Isabel took this news in. So you can't heal any of the sick people, she asked Max. I'm afraid it will make them all worse. Isabel looked down at her hands, frowning. Michael knew how she felt. They seemed to be out of options. Kyle was still sick too, he said, and Maria's mom. Isabel just nodded without meeting his eye. She was taking it pretty hard, he thought. I have some news, Valenti said, coming into the room, though it's not especially good. What is it? Michael asked. That was the CDC outreach person on the phone. They're setting up hours for family members to visit the people in quarantine. Max frowned. Is that safe? They've determined the virus is waterborne, Valenti said. So they'll put the patients in plastic tents and you can talk to them from outside. If we get in and talk to Liz, she can tell us where that water bottle came from. Maybe that water bottle came from. Maybe that will help us figure it out. Michael knew he was grasping at straws, but he couldn't think of anything else to do. It'll be a while, Valenti said. They're doing it alphabetically by last name. I won't be able to see Kyle until tomorrow, probably, and in the meantime, he won't even tell me how he is. Valenti's voice broke, and Isabel reached over to take his hand. Maria, Michael said. What about her? Max asked. Her name starts with D. She'll get in to see her mom today. Maybe they'll let her talk to Liz, too. It's worth a try, Max said. And it will give me an excuse to find out how Maria's coping with her dad, Michael thought as he dialed Maria's number into his cell phone. Maria's phone was ringing. Sadie turned away from her examination of Maria's jewelry box and flung herself on the bed. She grabbed up the phone from the bedside table. Maria's phone, she said into the receiver. Hey, kid, it's Michael. Sadie grinned. Hi, Michael. How are you? I'm fine. Listen, is Maria there? Michael said. No, she's in the shower, Sadie told him. She rolled over on her back and stared at the ceiling, where Maria had put tiny glow-in-the-dark stars. Maria let me sleep in her room last night. She's the coolest sister ever. There was a pause on the other end of the phone. Are you and Maria going to get married? Sadie asked. Because if you do, then you'll be my brother-in-law. Wouldn't that be weird? Michael started coughing. While Sadie waited for him to finish, she sat up so she could bounce on the bed. That's when she noticed her father standing in the doorway. He didn't look very happy. Sadie, can you ask Maria to call me? Michael said. Tell her it's important. Okay, Sadie said. Bye. She hung up the phone and turned back to her dad. Was that Michael? He asked. Yeah, Sadie said. He's been Maria's boyfriend for 2 years. Her father frowned and went back out into the kitchen. He was distracted, she could tell. Sadie sighed. She'd been trying to pretend that everything was fine, but her father was miserable, and Maria was even more miserable. All last night, she'd lain in Maria's bed, trying to imagine how it must feel to grow up without a father. She couldn't imagine it. Maria came in with her hair wrapped in a towel. "Hey, Squirt," she said with a wan smile. "Did you sleep okay?" Sadie nodded. "Maria, do you think you'll ever forgive Dad?" she asked suddenly. Her sister looked surprised. "Well, I don't know," she said. "I think it would be hard," Sadie told her. "If he did that to me, I mean." Maria sighed and sat down on the bed next to her. "He's not ever going to do that to you, Sadie. He made a mistake with me, and he could learn from it. I really believe that." "So you forgive him?" Maria shook her head. "It's not that easy, honey, and this is a really bad time with my mom sick." Her voice broke. Sadie felt a lump in her throat. She's been really selfish coming to Roswell. She'd made her parents worry, and she'd turned Maria's whole life upside down. "I shouldn't have come here. I didn't mean to make you feel bad," she said quietly. "I just wanted to see what you were like. I didn't realize you would get hurt." Maria reached out and pulled Sadie into her arms. "It's not your fault," she said. "You and me will always be friends, okay?" "Okay. I see you're borrowing my eyeliner," Maria added. Sadie smiled. "Is it okay?" "Yep, that's what sisters are for." Maria got up and started looking through her closet. "Michael called," Sadie said. "She says it's important." Maria turned around so fast that Sadie jumped back a little. Excuse me," she said, and then she was gone. "Thanks for letting me drive you," Richard said. Maria just stared at out the window, wishing they would get to Medichem already. When her father had heard she was heading over to visit Amy, he'd insisted on driving her there. He'd said she might be too emotional to drive. If only it had occurred to him to think about my feelings when I was a little kid, she thought. Are you going to tell your mother I'm here?" he asked nervously. Maria snorted. "Do you really think I want to kick her while she's down?" She asked. "Hey, Mom, sorry you've got some bizarre outbreak of asthma. Did you know the guy who abandoned you has been happily married with kids for 4 years now? I didn't abandon your mother. We got a divorce." "Oh, that's right," Maria snapped. "You only abandoned me." Well, that about shut him up, she thought, as the silence stretched out. Then she heard a sniffle. Maria turned away from the window to look at her father. His cheeks were wet, and he was silently crying as he drove. She stared at him, hardly even noticing the tears that had formed in her own eyes. Maria tried to remember anything about her father. She couldn't think of one thing, one actual memory with any content, but she remembered his hoarse sound, which was closer to sounding like a hyena, but she had no idea why she remembered it. She couldn't remember a time when she'd made a horse sound for her. She remembered the smell of the cologne he used to wear, but she couldn't remember what it was called, and she couldn't remember ever seeing him put it on. All her life, she'd been trying to forget him. Now here he was, driving her car, and crying. Is it even possible to see a man cry and not want to hug him and comfort him? Maria wondered. Right now, her father was just a guy, not the monster who'd left her with no money and no father to love, not the selfish jerk who was willing to have a whole second family without even telling them about the first family. Just a guy who was crying so hard he could barely drive. "Dad," she said, "pull over." He did. He put the car in park and then he just sat there crying. Maria stayed in her seat, crying too. "There's no excuse," he finally said through his sobs. "I love you. I always loved you. There's no excuse for what I did. I don't blame you if you hate me forever." "I don't hate you," Maria said, surprised to find that it was true. "Really?" He looked at her hopefully. "Yeah," she said, but I don't love you either. I don't know what to feel. I don't know anything about you except that you left me." "I know," he said, fresh tears falling. "But I know a lot about you. I know how sweet your skin smelled when you were a baby. And I know that your favorite book was Martha the movie mouse. You would never go to sleep until I'd read it to you at least twice. Sweet Pea, I had 7 years with you. I've been holding on to those years ever since. In my mind, you're always my baby girl." Maria wiped her eyes. "I don't remember those years," she whispered. "Can you take my word for it?" he asked. "I guess," she replied. She took a shaky breath. "But it doesn't make up for the 10 years in between." Richard sighed. "I understand that." They sat in silence for a minute, both of them sniffling. "I have to get to Medicam," Maria said finally. "Okay," he answered, putting the car in gear. He pulled back out onto the road. "Thanks for driving me," Maria said. Okay, that was chapter 11. Now we're on to chapter 12. "So what's going on outside?" Amy asked. She immediately stuck the oxygen mask back over her nose and mouth. "Oh, not much," Maria lied. "The whole town is sort of shut down." She tried not to let her mother see how worried she was. Amy looked terrible, thin and pale and tired. Maria had never seen her mother look so tired. Amy pulled the mask down again. "I've been hearing whispers around here that this all started at the crash down," she said. "Yep, Michael's soup was infected." Amy just rolled her eyes. Mom is supposed to be the one worrying about me, Maria thought. I don't like it this way. She had a sudden vision of what it would be like if her mother never got better. Maria felt as if she might hyperventilate. What's it like inside that thing? She asked, nodding to the plastic tent that covered Amy's cot. It was strange to be making small talk with your mother, but glancing around the room, Maria saw other family members doing the same thing. It's pretty annoying, Amy admitted. I can't really see you. You're all distorted by the plastic. So are you, Maria grinned. Your nose looks huge. Shut up, Amy cried. They sat in companionable silence for a moment. But hey, Mom, do you need me to do anything? Maria asked. For the business, I mean. I know I was being kind of a pain in the butt before. It's okay, Amy replied. You have your own life and your own job to worry about. Yeah, but your alien stuff is the family business, Maria said, and I'm going to help you with it from now on. Oh, Maria, you hate those alien tchotchkes. I know, Maria said, but I love you. Her mother laughed. Don't get all morbid on me, honey. I'm not going to die in here. Promise? Maria asked. Because I don't know what I'd do without you. I think your mom needs to rest now, said the nurse, who was taking care of Amy's section of the room. Maria felt a stab of panic. Had she tired her mother too much? I'm fine, Amy told her, as if she could feel Maria's fear. I'm just wheezy. Okay, Maria said, standing up. I'll come back and see you as soon as they let me. Amy nodded tiredly and waved as Maria left. She walked slowly down the row of beds. Because it was visiting day, the nurses weren't paying much attention to security. All the quarantine patients had been put in their own private plastic tent. Maria scanned each bed, looking for Liz. She was supposed to find out where Liz got the water bottle. That's what Michael had said. But mostly she just wanted to see for herself that her best friend was okay. Where was Liz? It was hard to see through these thick plastic tents. She reached the end of one row of beds and casually stared the other row. Maria, the voice was muffled, but it was definitely Kyle's. She stopped walking and squinted through the plastic. Kyle lay on the bed inside. Unlike her mother, he had no tubes in him and no oxygen mask. Kyle, how are you feeling? Like a freak, he said. And don't talk so loud. I can't handle loud noises. Okay, she said. Where's Liz? I'm supposed to. Hey, took her, he interrupted. I need to get a message to Max. Maria blinked in surprise. From Liz? She sat down on the chair next to Kyle's bed. Hopefully, no one would notice that he wasn't supposed to have visitors today. They took Liz because she was the first one sick, Kyle told her. They're going to do tests and they're going to find that the virus is mutated alien DNA. What? Just listen and tell Max everything I say, Kyle said urgently. Liz says she and I have alien DNA mixed with our DNA because Max healed us both. And when Liz cleaned up that chemical spill in the lab here, Dr. Sosa's lab. Oh, right. She thinks whatever the chemical was, it got into her system and caused a mutation in her alien DNA. Then she spread it to other people. She and I have one set of symptoms because it's activated, and our alien attributes and our alien genes. And everyone else, it activated whatever genes they had for all these different sicknesses, Maria said. Yeah, that's what Liz says, but no one else knows the virus itself is alien. It comes from Liz's alien DNA. The CDC won't figure that out because of the whole they don't believe in aliens thing. Exactly. So Max has to figure out how to stop the virus. Got it, Maria said, standing up. How long ago did they take Liz away? Hours and hours, Kyle replied. She was much sicker than I am. When Max touched her, she got even worse. He was probably putting more alien DNA into her system just by trying to heal her. So she's overdoing on alien genes. So she's overdosing on alien genes. She and I both, Kyle said. He dropped his head back onto his pillow. I have to sleep now. Don't worry, Valeni, Maria said gently. We'll take it from here. Alien DNA, Valeni shook his head. That's it. The entire virus. It's alien DNA. It's my DNA, Max corrected him. This is all my fault. I always thought I was doing a good thing when I killed people. Turns out I was infecting them with some big-time bomb. I should have known better than to think I could do anything to help people, he thought bitterly. Every time I try to do the right thing, it has awful side effects. Max, it's just not true, Isabel said. This virus came from a chemical spill. Maybe we're lucky it was Liz in that lab. If it had been one of us, the virus would have been much stronger. So her DNA mutated, Michael said, and that's what's swimming around in everyone else now. What do we do about it? It seems they're all sick because their bodies can't handle the alien influence, Max said, so we have to get rid of the alien DNA in them. Not necessarily, Lenny put in. He was pacing around his living room. Think about it. Alien and human DNA can coexist. You guys have both. That's true, Isabel said. And if Liz is right, she and Kyle have both had some alien DNA for a while now, and they've been fine. So it's not the DNA we need to target, Maria said. It's the mutation. No, it doesn't work that way, Max said, trying to remember his genetics. There should be a gene that acts as a sort of bridge. It allows the human and the alien to coexist without harming each other. We all must have that gene, and Liz and Kyle should have it too. So the chemical spill did something to deactivate that gene in Liz, Michael said. How do we fix it? I go in again and try to heal her, Max said. Then the CDC can use a sample of Liz's DNA to make a cure for the others. Then half the people in Roswell will have alien DNA, Valenti said. Guess seems kind of appropriate. The last time you made Liz even worse, Maria cried. Well, this time I know what to look for, Max replied, unless anyone has a better idea. He looked around the room. No one said anything. Okay, I'm going to figure out how to do this. You guys figure out how to get me to Liz. He headed out to Valenti's backyard, needing to be alone. He didn't want to let the others see how frightened he was. Maria had a good point. Last time he made Liz's illness worse. This time he could kill her. I have no choice, he thought. Liz wouldn't be this situation if I hadn't put her in it. He sighed heavily. If she got through this, he would leave her alone. She wasn't sure she wanted to get back together with him. And maybe she was right to feel that way. It seemed that everything he did put Liz in danger, even though this was she was the most important thing to him. So if she still wanted him to back off, he would. But first he would save her life. Michael pulled on the pant leg of Kyle's Medichem jumpsuit. This is way too short, he complained to Max. No one will ever believe it's my uniform. Max shot him an impatient look. Then fix it, he said. I don't know how, Michael tried, zapping the fabric with his powers, but he only succeeded in burning a tiny hole in the knee. Max reached over and grabbed the hem of one leg. He ripped the stitching and pulled the hem down. Now the leg was only about an inch too short. Michael said. He pulled down the hem on the other leg. If anyone asks, I'm looking for a job and you're taking me in to meet your boss, Max said. Right, and my name is Kyle from housekeeping, Michael said. Let's go. They climbed out of Kyle's pickup, which Valenti had lent them, walked up to the employee entrance of the Medichem building. Michael unlocked the door with Kyle's passkey and held the door open for Max to enter. A bored-looking security guard sat at a small desk inside. You mind if I bring my friend in for an interview? Michael asked gruffly. The guard shrugged. Michael led Max past him, pretending that he knew where they were going. Once they were going around the corner from the guard, they stopped. Michael pulled out the map Isabel had drawn of where the CDC headquarters were. This way, he said. It's not far from here. I hope that's where Liz is, Max said. Only one way to find out. Look sharp. They headed deeper into Medichem, and Michael tried not to think about what was waiting for them. Because after this, they had no plan. How to find Liz, how to save her. Max would just have to handle that part. Liz, can you hear me? The voice vibrated through Liz's body slowly. It's weird that my metabolism is speeding up when everything else feels so much slower, Liz thought. Light hit her eyes in slow-moving waves, and so did the sound. Is this what the aliens feel like all the time? She wondered. It truly was an alien experience. Liz? It was Maris Wheeler's voice. Some part of Liz knew that. She forced her eyelids to open. The room was dark. They kept it dark and quiet because they knew what Liz's symptoms were. All in all, they'd been pretty nice. Of course, she'd had lots of blood taken, and they did tests frequently. How did they get all the medical equipment to Medichem as fast, she wondered. They even had an MRI machine. You have an MRI, she murmured, trying to focus on Maris's face. Yes, my husband is very ill. We treat him here. The voice swam down to Liz through layers of white noise. The hum of the monitor she was hooked up to. The buzzing of the fluorescent lights out in the hallway. The murmur of voices from the CDC headquarters nearby. If Liz wanted to, she could focus on any of one of these sounds and block out the others. But that took a lot of energy, and she felt so weak. Liz, do you know why you're here? Maris asked. Because I cleaned up the spill, Liz murmured. It mutated me. That's right, Maris smiled widely. That's exactly right. The lights went out, but Liz barely registered that because the siren that started to ring was so loud that she thought the sound would burst her eardrums. There was nothing in the world of the piercing sound, but that piercing sound and the pain it caused. Pain like nothing Liz had ever felt before, and pain she seemed to feel on a molecular level. Liz, can you hear me? This time the voice was Max's. Liz slowly became aware of the piercing alarm sound was gone. The lights were still off. What happened? She whispered. Michael pulled the fire alarm. We had to get everyone out of here. They'll be back in a matter of minutes. Max was talking very fast. Liz listened to the sound of his voice, but she couldn't follow the words. I'm going to try to heal you. It won't be like last time. I'm going to look for one specific gene, Max was saying. This gene turned off, and I need to turn it back on. Liz was aware of two things, fear and love, and she'd never experienced emotions like this before. With her whole body. The fear came from somewhere in her spine, sending tiny tremors up through the muscles of her back. She was afraid for Max to touch her because last time it hurt so much. The love came from the pit of her stomach and sent waves of heat radiating through her chest. The love made all the parts of her body call out for Max. Max. Max, she whispered, I love you. I feel it in every single cell. I can hardly bear how much I love you. I love you the same way, he told her. I know you do, Liz murmured. You told me that about it once, about how we loved each other so much that nothing else mattered. We got married and we were happy, but then Tess felt left out. Liz, Max sounded worried. Stay with me. She hated the concern in his voice. She didn't want him to worry. She had to comfort him. It's okay, Max, she told him. I did what you wanted. I made you fall out of love with me. Now the future is different. What are you talking about? Max asked. Then he went on quickly. Never mind. Just focus on me touching you. Then his hand was on her cheek. She felt warmth coming from his hand, but this time there was no pain. The warmth traveled throughout her body. It was seeking something, she knew, searching through her cells. And then it stopped and turned suddenly cold. The warmth had found what it was looking for. The new cold feeling spread out from where it started, filling her body and her mind. To Liz, it seemed that everything went backward. The sounds of her monitors decreased as if someone had turned a giant volume knob in her head. The room, which had been as bright as noon, sunk into darkness. Her heartbeat, which had been filling her ears for most of the day now, suddenly became inaudible. Liz sat up and looked around a small, dark room. Max was watching her. Are you back? She mentally took stock of herself. Sounds were as normal. Sight was normal. I'm back, she said. I feel completely fine. Max reached out again and touched her cheek. Liz. Then he collapsed. Max, Liz cried. The door burst open. Michael rushed in, dressed in a tight-fitting jumpsuit. He looked at Liz, then at Max, lying on the floor. What happened? He healed me, Liz said. And then it drained his energy, Michael interrupted. I've seen him like this before. He bent down and heaved Max onto his shoulder in a fireman's carry. Is he okay? Liz asked anxiously. Michael nodded impatiently. They're coming back, he said. You have to explain it somehow. He turned and ran, carrying Max. Liz took a deep breath and waited. The door flew open again, and then about 5 doctors stopped in astonishment when they saw her sitting up. Liz gave them a smile. Maris Wheeler pushed her way through the doctors and rushed over to Liz. What happened? She asked, taking Liz's hand. I'm not exactly sure, Liz said. I think it was a miracle. And she wasn't even lying. That was chapter 12.
Quarantine, chapter 13. She's okay? Alan Sosa asked. Maris narrowed her eyes at him. Yes, she's fine. Though how it happened will remain a mystery, at least to the CDC. What do you mean? He said. Surely they studied her afterward. Yes, they studied her. They used her DNA to fashion a cure for the rest of the people you infected. I just mean that they don't understand what happened. Either why it began or why it ended. There are only 2 of us who know that, Alan, you and me. He looked paler than usual, she thought. His hand shook as he lifted the cup of coffee her assistant had brought him. I'm done with Medicam, he said. I don't want trouble between us, but I think you'll agree that I have more dirt to blackmail you with now than what you have on me. I want to call it even. Alan, you spread a dangerous virus around the whole city. A virus that you created out of DNA you got from God knows where. I won't let you pin this on me, he said. I didn't want to test that serum on humans, and you know it. Nevertheless, you did give it to Liz Parker. You forced me to. The shaking was getting more violent. Maris wondered idly what kind of poison her assistant put in the coffee. She herself never liked to know the details of these things. That way the assistant could take the fall for it later if need be. Look, you got what you wanted, Alan was saying. You saw how the serum works in humans. It's a disaster. It won't help your husband. That's true. I'll have to find a healer himself. I can't just use his DNA. Well, fine, Alan said. He put down the coffee cup and stood. Just count me out. He took 1 step towards the door, then fell flat on his face, dead. I'll do that, Maris said. I simply don't understand it, Diane Evans was saying as Isabel entered the kitchen. None of us does, her husband Philip replied, but I think the firm will be looking at a lot of business and lawsuits from this quarantine. Isabel poured herself some coffee and tried to act casual. Hey, Dad, I thought I saw that new lawyer at the hospital, she said. Jesse something? Her father nodded. Jesse Ramirez. When were you at the hospital? Diane asked. Isabel gulped her coffee. I went there because Max was there with Liz. Oh, that's right, Diane said. Poor Liz, she was the first one sick. There's another lawsuit waiting to happen, Philip put in. I should give Liz's father a call. He's going to be sued by everyone who got sick at the crash down. He'll need a good lawyer. What about Jesse? Isabel blurted out, trying to keep the conversation on track. He had a heart attack, they said. A heart attack? Diane exclaimed. Why, he can't be more than 26. He's fine now, Philip told her. His symptoms completely reversed themselves. He told me the doctor said that if they hadn't seen the attack themselves, they wouldn't have even been able to tell he'd had a heart attack. But does that mean he'll have one later on? Isabel asked, still worried. When he's older? Philip shook his head. They ran some tests. Can't even find a single warning sign of congenital heart disease. And it runs in his family. It seems that whatever they used to cure him actually reversed the genetic weakness entirely. Max's DNA, Isabel thought. It's his healing power, working correctly this time. She smiled. No one in Roswell really understood what had happened. The CDC had taken samples of Liz's DNA, found an anomaly, and used it to create a sort of vaccine. Only Isabel and her friends knew that Liz's DNA had been changed by Max, and that's what had saved them all. So Jesse is okay? She asked. Her parents both looked at her in surprise. Guess he's fine, Philip replied. I never knew you paid so much attention to my employees and their health. Isabel gave him a kiss on the cheek. I'm just looking out for my dad, she chirped. Nothing could ruin her good mood now. Jesse was back to normal. So your mom will be okay? Sadie asked, as she loaded a duffel bag full of Marie's old clothes into the car. The citywide quarantine had been lifted as of this morning, and Sadie and her dad were on their way back to Arizona. Maria nodded. They all will. Liz says they gave everyone the medicine they made from her DNA, and all of those diseases reversed course immediately. It's like everyone was miraculously healed. It's like everyone was miraculously cured at once. Wild, huh? Her dad shrugged. I'd forgotten that about Roswell. What? All the weird stuff that happens here, he said. Everyone gets sick with hereditary diseases they probably didn't know they had, and then boom, they're all better, and the genes carrying those diseases are gone. It's like some giant lab experiment. If only you knew how right you are, Maria thought. Was it always like that? She said out loud. Yeah, Richard answered. There used to be strange murders and unexplained lights in the sky and plant life that had unidentifiable DNA. You'd read about it in the paper, but every time something weird would happen, it would just go away a little while later. Nobody ever got an explanation. Maria grinned. I guess that's one thing that will never change. Her father smiled back. Well, I guess we better get going, he said. Yeah, I have to get over to Medican to pick up my mom. Maria turned to Sadie and opened her arms. I'm going to miss you, Sadie said with a sniffle as she threw herself into Maria's embrace. You have my email, Maria told her little sister. We might not see each other for a while, but you can keep in touch that way. Sadie looked up into Maria's eyes. And we'll always be friends, right? Right, Maria told her. She felt a prickling at the back of her own eyes. It's amazing how attached I've gotten to her in just a few days, she thought. She kissed Sadie's cheek and pulled open the passenger door. Sadie climbed into the car and shut the door. Maria turned to her father, knowing that they couldn't keep pretending nothing was wrong. Maria, he said, I know we're not exactly on good terms. Dad, listen, Maria said. I can hardly believe I'm saying this, but I'm glad that I know where you are and that you're okay. And I'm glad you had Sadie because she's amazing. I sense a butt coming, Richard said sadly. But I'm just not ready to say everything is okay between us, Maria went on. Because of you, I've spent my whole life feeling worthless. I can't get over that so easily. Okay, her father said quietly. Mom has been my mother and my father for 10 years now, Maria said, and I take her for granted. I'm going to try to make my relationship with her better. Then maybe I'll want to make a new relationship with you. I just can't do both I just can't do both right now. I've given this a lot of thought, and I'm not trying to punish you. I understand that, Maria, Michael said. I understand that, Maria, Richard said. For the record, I'd like to be involved in your life, but I'll leave the time frame up to you. Please promise me you'll at least think about it. Maria took a deep breath. Okay, I'll think about it. Her father gave her a long, serious look. I do love you, Maria, he said. Then he turned and climbed into the car. Maria watched them pull away from the house. Half of her wanted to run up to the car, and the other half of her hoped she would never see him again. You okay? She turned to see Michael, standing in the doorway of her house. Maria let out a little sob, and instantly Michael rushed over to hold her. Maria buried her face in his chest and let the tears flow for a minute. Then she took a deep breath. I'll be all right, she said shakily. Good, Michael released her. When did you get here? She asked. A few minutes ago. Came in the back. I didn't want to interrupt you guys. I don't think your father likes me. Maria laughed. You know, your mother doesn't like me either, Michael joked. Who cares? Maria said. I like you just fine. Liz walked slowly down the stairs to the crash down. She'd been home for a full day, but this was the first time her father was letting her get out of bed. She hadn't minded the rest, actually. The strange symptoms of her sickness were completely gone, but her body still felt exhausted. She pushed open the swinging door to the dining room. Surprise! Liz gasped and jumped. A little crowd of people had gathered in the crash down. Max and Michael, Maria and her mom, Kyle and Valenti, and her own parents. Hey, everyone, she said. Here's the girl with the magic jeans. Amy teased, giving Liz a hug. Are you as happy to be out of Medichem as I am? You know it, Liz replied. I'm never going back there, scholarship or not. Me either, Kyle put in. I called my boss and quit this morning. I've seen enough of that place to last forever. And I won't mind having you home where I can see you for a while, Valenti said, punching his son on the arm. I'll second that, Maria joked, punching her mother on the arm. Who wants brunch? Jeff Parker asked, heading towards the kitchen. It may be a while before the Board of Health lets us reopen, but I can serve you all cold cereal. That's just what I'm here to talk to you about, Maris Wheeler said from the doorway. Liz jumped. She hadn't even heard the bell ring. Maris made her way over to the counter. Hope you don't mind the intrusion, she said. I wanted to make sure Liz was feeling better. I am, thanks, Miss Wheeler, Liz told her. I keep telling you, call me Maris, she corrected with a smile. Liz, I have some news. The CDC's investigation has determined that the chemical spill in Dr. Sosa's lab was responsible for creating a mutation in your DNA that led to the virus. Somehow you must have infected the water you were carrying, and then the water spread it to everyone else. That's just what you thought it was, Max said, smiling at Liz. Well, there's a reason she's going to be a brilliant scientist, Mara said. They still haven't figured out exactly what was in that substance you touched. Dr. Sosa didn't turn it over to the CDC, unfortunately. We were clearly very wrong to trust him with such sensitive research. He was using our labs to conduct his own studies on who knows what. I never did trust him, Liz admitted. He's been fired, needless to say, Maris told her, so I'm afraid we won't have a job for you this summer, Liz. The scholarship money is still yours, of course. That's a relief, Jeff said. Oh, Mr. Parker, I have news for you, too, Maris went on, turning to him. Since this virus was created at Medichem, I've spoken to the CDC on your behalf. We take full responsibility for what happened. Your restaurant can hardly be blamed for Liz spreading a disease she didn't know she had. The Board of Health will want to do a routine inspection, but after that, you should be free to open again. Liz watched her father's face break into a huge grin. Thank you, Miss Wheeler, he said. I can't tell you how happy that makes me. It's the least I can do, Mara said. I'll let you all get back to your celebration. Wow, Liz watched her go with a smile. She must be the most honest CEO ever. That's funny, because she's not honest. All right. Isabel locked the front door behind her and started down the sidewalk. She was supposed to meet up with her friends at the crash down. It was a show of support for the Parkers because everyone was blaming them for the recent epidemic. It was common knowledge that the virus had been spread for the crash down. Just another example of how our human friends having to take the blame for something alien, she thought guiltily. A car slowed down in the street next to her. Isabel ignored it. Someone whistled at her from the car. She ignored that, too. Why were men always such pigs? Hey, Isabel! She stopped and turned towards the car. Jessie was at the wheel. Jessie! She cried. So glad you're okay. 100%, he replied. Get in before someone sees us together. She got in. Thank God you're feeling better, Isabel said, as Jessie drove around the block. When I saw you at the hospital, I know it was freaky, he said. I know heart disease ran in my family, but I'm too young to have a heart attack. Isabel looked down at her hands. But you're too old to be with me, right? That's why I came to find you, Jessie said. He pulled over to the curb and parked. Then he turned in his seat and looked at Isabel. Being sick like that got me thinking. Life's too short to care about stupid things like a little age difference. Isabel smiled hopefully. I think I'm falling in love with you, Isabel said, taking her hand. And if you want to take things slow and not tell your family about us yet, that's fine with me. In fact, I think it's kind of fun sneaking around with you. Isabel felt the blood rush to her cheeks. She threw her arms around his neck. Oh, Jessie, I was so miserable. You were sick, and I couldn't even comfort you. You can comfort me now, he murmured. Then he kissed her, and Isabel forgot all about their problems. There's still one thing I don't understand, Max said onto Liz's hair. They lay cuddled together on her bed that evening. What? Kyle said you found alien cells in Dr. Sosa's lab before there was any chemical spill or any virus. He felt Liz stiffen. That's right, I'd forgotten about that, she said. You didn't tell me about it, Max added softly. Liz sat up and looked him in the eye. I was avoiding you. I know, he said. Why? Because you're still hung up on finding your son. I thought I wasn't your top priority. Max didn't know what to say. Liz was definitely his top priority here on Earth, But he did have to find his son. That was his responsibility as a parent. Do you mean I have to choose between you and my son? It's hard for me to get used to the fact that you have a son, Liz said. But now I know it doesn't mean that you don't love me. When you were healing me in Medichem, I could feel how strong your love was. I don't know how to handle all this stuff with your son, Max. I'm going to have to think about that some more. But you're going to stop avoiding me? He asked. She pressed her lips to his. Oh, yes, she answered. Max held her silently for a moment. There was something else he wanted to ask her, but he wasn't sure if he should. What are you thinking about? Liz asked. Max smiled. She could always tell when something was bothering him. Something you said before I healed you, he replied. I was wondering what you meant, but I think you were just delirious. Liz sat up and looked at him. I told you I love you. Yes, but you also said something about getting married and making me fall out of love with you. Liz paled. I guess I was delirious. I shouldn't have told you about that. I don't know if I can talk to you about it. About what? She searched his face. About this thing that happened last year, an alien thing. Now Max sat up too. You have to tell me, he said simply. Okay. Liz bit her lip. Well, one day you came to me, but it wasn't you. I mean, it was you. From the future. Maybe she's still delirious, Max thought. What? He said aloud. Max, just hear me out. You came back from the future. You said the granolith could be used for time travel. Max didn't know what to think. The granolith was gone, and he'd never known much about how it worked. You said we were happy and we were married, but it made Tess feel abandoned, so she left. But you needed her. All four of you needed to be together. There was a threat to Earth, and you needed Tess, but she wasn't there. Max was doubtful. He hated Tess so much lately that he couldn't imagine ever needing her. You told me I had to change what happened, Liz went on. You said I had to make sure you fell out of love with me so that you would turn to Tess. That way you never leave. You said I had to change the future. Suddenly Max understood. He felt as if all the air had left his lungs. Kyle, he whispered. You pretended to sleep with him. You knew I'd catch you. Liz's eyes were brimming with tears. I had to make you stop loving me, she said sadly. It was the only way I could think of. Max was stunned. He couldn't get his mind around what Liz was telling him, well, except for one part. I didn't stop loving you, he said, tears pricking at his own eyes. There was no way I could ever stop, no matter what you did. You're in my blood, Liz. You're a part of me. I will love you forever. He pulled her into his arms and held her tightly, pressing her against him. I thought you didn't care about me anymore. I thought you wanted me to be with Tess, he said. And all that time you were just trying to help me? Liz nodded. You said it would mean the end of the world if Tess left. I was only trying to do the right thing. Max closed his eyes and just breathed in the scent of her hair. Of course you were, he whispered. That's who you are. That's why I love you. He hated to think of how she must have felt all those months while he was dating Tess. He thought Liz had moved on first and she didn't love him at all, but in reality her heart must have been breaking every time she'd seen them together. How can you even be here with me when all I do is hurt you? Max asked. I don't mean to, but I always seem to end up causing you pain. Liz pulled back so that she could look him in the eye. You do hurt me, she agreed. But you also heal me. You saved my life at the crash down 2 years ago, and you just saved my life again. When you were healing me, Max, I felt how afraid you were to lose me. I know how much I mean to you. He kissed her softly, just taking in the amazing feeling of her in his arms. I can't believe you loved me all that time, but he said. What about Tess? Liz stiffened. What about her? Well, she's gone, Max pointed out. Didn't you say we had to keep her from leaving or something horrible would happen? Yes, Liz said. But it might be okay. We changed the timeline. Things haven't happened the way they would have before. Maybe it will work out differently. Max wasn't sure what to think. How could he plan for some giant disaster that might never materialize? I guess we'll just have to put it on our list of possible threats, he said, trying to lighten the mood. Somewhere between the government finding out about us and global warming. Guess so, Liz replied with a smile. They gazed into each other's eyes for a moment. Max sighed happily. So you don't have feelings for Kyle? He asked. Liz burst out laughing. Kyle? Well, you two did pretend to sleep together, and you were pretty close at Medichem. Plus, you told him about the alien cells in the lab. Liz frowned suddenly. Why were those cells there? She said. Do you think Dr. Sosa was using them for his research? Do you think he knows about you guys? Max pulled her back into his arms. Miss Wheeler said he destroyed all his research. If he had alien cells, he must have destroyed them too. I guess we'll never know what he was doing with them, Liz murmured. We'll keep an eye out for him, Max told her. Just add him to our list of threats too. Yeah, Liz said. I wonder where he is. Maris watched as the last drum of medical waste was sealed shut. These are disposed of by incineration, right? She asked the technician. The technician nodded. We take them down to the basement and burn them. Then the residue is kept in an airtight container. We can't take any chances with this stuff. I agree, Maris said. She watched impassively as the drum containing Alan Sosa's body was carted away with the rest of the waste. I'm lucky these science types don't have many friends. She thought. So far, no one questioned her story about Dr. Sosa skipping town, and she didn't expect that anyone ever would. Maris walked slowly down the Medichem hallway to the room where they kept her elderly husband. Clayton was hooked up to about 20 different machines. He couldn't talk because of the tube in his mouth, but the expression in his eyes was as sharp as ever. I have a new scientist working on the DNA from Liz Parker's blood, Maris told him. His name is Dr. Farrell. I lured him away from the CDC. Clayton smiled with satisfaction. Don't worry, darling, Maris cooed. Sooner